Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, Dan shares his path from the strategy group at Accenture to M&A strategy at Deloitte and how he positioned himself to work with private equity clients. We learn what he does day to day and how his responsibilities have shifted now that he is working within a private equity fund to help their portfolio companies drive growth. Enjoy. Dan, welcome to the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Awesome. Hey, Patrick. Very nice to meet you. How are you doing?
Great. So I'd love it if you could just give the listeners a short summary of your bio.
Yeah, absolutely. So Daniel, I'm currently an associate at a lower middle market private equity firm on the portfolio support team. My role is really driving all things post-deal for our portfolio companies. So, starts with portfolio company onboarding, getting our reporting package set up, aligning on key KPIs and metrics on how we're going to measure the business as we grow it. In addition to that, support a variety of growth strategy and operational improvement engagements across our buyout fund, our middle market fund, our buyout fund, our growth equity fund, as well as our small cap fund. And prior to that, spent 2 years at a Big Four consulting firm. And then prior to that, was at another top 5, top 7 strategy consulting firm, both times supporting financial sponsors as well as strategic investors on a variety of engagements, everything from commercial investment due diligence to growth strategy, international expansion, to operational improvement, cost takeout, as well as PMO engagements.
Very cool. I'm excited about this one because we've had a lot of guests that are, in private equity on the actual investment side, but not so many guests on the actual strategy / kind of portfolio support side or operations side. So let's go all the way back just for your story. Let's start in undergrad. Did you always know finance kind of was, or strategy or consulting was kind of on the radar, or when did that kind of come on the radar? Was it freshman year, sophomore year? Were you like pre-med like me and then switched, or what was the progression of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, knew I wanted to get into consulting, didn't really know a lot about investment banking or private equity. And about my junior year, was looking for a kind of a fall internship. Senior year was going to be kind of light. So wanted to kind of identify something to kind of use my time. And actually had the privilege to intern with Ares Management on the transformation team. And, to be honest with you, that was kind of my first experience in private equity. Honestly, didn't know what it was before looking up Ares. Mm-hmm. But, got there and just fell in love with the business model of getting to grow, scale, and optimize businesses. And frankly, knew that was what I wanted to do long term.
That was junior year?
That was fall of senior year.
Oh, so pretty late. So what were you doing in the summer, like your sophomore year and your junior year?
Yeah. So sophomore, junior year, had consulting internships at large consulting firms. And that was kind of the path that I was going to take post-graduation.
So you kind of knew, it sounds like you knew pretty early on, like you're like, okay, consulting is what I'm doing, but then you kind of got a little exposed to private equity. Very cool. And so like that summer, let's talk about that summer internship with Ares. Was it ever expected to like be
that was a fall internship.
Sorry, a fall internship. Yeah. Was it ever expected to be like become a full-time offer, or you just thought, hey, this is interesting? And did you have internships throughout the year, like throughout your college career?
No, so I typically do not have a kind of semester internship normally. Mm-hmm. Just senior year had a little lighter course load, so wanted to kind of identify, get a little head start on work experience, frankly, which is why I kind of took the path to get that internship.
You're a go-getter, yeah. So did you have a full-time offer after your junior summer?
Yeah, so I had a full-time offer, joined Accenture right after graduation.
Nice. Okay, so you're going in there. You're at a great firm. You're thinking to yourself, this, consulting or strategy is going to be interesting. And you get to work with sponsors right away. Tell me what that work was like. Was the learning curve super steep, or because you had done an internship also, the previous 2 years, did it feel like you fit right in? Or I'd love to just hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was that guy when I joined Accenture. Day one, had already looked up everyone who worked on private equity engagements, got my laptop, I think day 2 of orientation, and was busy looking them up on kind of the talent on demand portal, kind of Accenture's internal portal, and just busy reaching out to every one of them saying, hi, I'm Daniel. brand new to the firm, really looking to get staff, worked in private equity, really enjoy the work. And, that's what I wanted to do long term. And the next week I was on a plane to Minneapolis to work on a cost takeout project for a large European sponsor who had bought a variety of consumer goods businesses in the US.
So it worked, that initial outreach right away. That, do you feel like that was because you kind of lean on that Aries internship, or do you feel like it was just simply because you put your hand up early that got you that?
Yeah, so I think it's both. I think, it definitely was the internship learning, basic Excel, nothing kind of super complex that, I do now, but, in learning to index match versus VLOOKUP, I thought, was really a good way to kind of separate myself from the kind of the rest of the group. Most people understand how to VLOOKUP. Fewer people at the entry level know how to index match. So, being able to kind of talk the talk with the senior manager, I think definitely gave me a leg up from the Accenture, from the Aries side. And then just from the pure kind of personal soft skill side, I think just putting your hand up, being aggressive and telling people, this is what you want to do. This is your experience. Also gave them a leg up, kind of just showing that initiative.
Did you feel like it might be taken the wrong way? Like, oh, he's trying to eventually get to private equity. Did you fear that at all? Or you just said, hey, you knew there was enough engagements at the firm in sponsors that it would, even if you put your hand up, it would be okay, kind of thing?
So I'd say, I kind of left the sponsor side a little to the back burner, did definitely emphasize my sponsor experience, but also kind of emphasized my Excel skills, the cost takeout engagement experience, and really could advocate kind of why I was interested in those roles and kind of where the value that I could provide.
It's funny you mentioned index match versus VLOOKUP. That's a little plug here. That's in our Excel modeling course. For the listeners here who want to get sharp on Excel, we have plenty of detail on that in actual we actually benchmark different exercises to make sure you're fast enough, like Daniel here.
Honestly, I actually think index match is easier to learn than VLOOKUP.
Yeah, well, it depends. Index and match itself are not powerful, but together they're pretty powerful, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about just that. You were there for a couple of years. How was the progression? It sounds like you were immediately what did they call it? You were on the beach and then you weren't, like, very fat, right?
Exactly.
Very fat. You didn't have much time on the beach. And then, so you basically, you were in Minneapolis for how long was that initial engagement? What was it like? Were you immediately kind of, was like, were your skills being leveraged right away, or was it more like you were on the sidelines initially?
No, absolutely. So, thrown in kind of right away, flew in Sunday night, Monday morning, we were all the client site and just frankly kind of thrown into the gauntlet right away. So I think, having that past strong internship experience was really helpful to understand how to format Excels, how to format PowerPoints, how to, work consistently and diligently, kind of really helped. But, it's consulting, I'm sure it's very so much investment making. You're kind of thrown in on to day one.
Yeah. And so you were working what, like 12, 14-hour days, you think, or you were with the client for like the 8-hour day and then having to go work for 4 or 5 more hours kind of thing? Or what was it like?
Yeah, definitely. The hours are consulting hours. Some are better than others. Some days are 8 hours, some days are 10 hours, some days are 12 hours. It just kind of depends on kind of what's due and kind of the project timeline.
And then you'd fly back on Thursdays?
Yeah, exactly. Thursday, Friday, kind of, sponsors require a little longer hours. So you're typically doing Sunday to Friday versus, Monday to Thursday.
Was the goal, did you have this vision of your career path, like eventually going to work at a portfolio fund for a while in the operations group? Was that the thought, or did you want to eventually be an investor?
I'd say initially I wanted to be an investor, but just more over time, realized that I wanted to kind of focus more on operations. Really just because, one, for me, it was really passionate about getting to grow, scale, and optimize the business, and a little less into looking at capital structure, and kind of PMOing, the legal diligence versus market diligence, getting to kind of really get into the weeds of the business was kind of what I was passionate about.
Like unit economics, building out all that stuff, and like the complex revenue builds. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Kind of getting into a little more nitty gritty of the details and really grow and scale the business versus kind of looking at the financials was kind of a little more.
Maybe there's a course we could do together at some point. I should talk to you offline, but I'm sure your modeling skills are amazing. But something around portfolio type, where maybe it's not. Maybe each client or each project is so different that it's impossible to kind of standardize anything, but there's probably something there. Anyways, that's for another discussion.
Every sponsor looks the same 5 things, right? So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
definitely kind of get that at a high level, I think.
Cool. Yeah. So you're there for a couple of years and you're put on a bunch of projects. What was the kind of impetus for starting to look for another role at another firm? When did you feel like, okay, this is a good time to move? Or was it something that just like a recruiter approached you? I'd love to hear about that transition and then how you actually interviewed for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the partners I worked at Accenture had actually moved on to Deloitte,
Mm-hmm.
part of the Canadian practice, and he had kind of really done sponsor pre-deal work. So we kind of stayed in touch over time, worked occasionally together. And when he left, I kind of reached out to him and just mentioned that I'd be kind of looking at some other opportunities. And he had mentioned that the U.S. firm is really looking to grow their private equity business. I thought it could be a great opportunity to kind of continue to leverage those skills as well as just focus on private equity a little bit more. Accenture just being so large, in my opinion, it seemed like they really wanted to focus more on large global M&A integration transactions, such as a Qualcomm NXP or any of those mega mergers where you're going to have billable integration work for a year plus,
Got
and
it.
less on that kind of pre-deal real strategy work that's 4 to 6 weeks in and out.
So pre-deal strategy work that, for example, pre-deal, like let's say a private equity firm has I'm just trying to understand where you guys come in and where you leave. So let's say a private equity fund has a deal under LOI. Is that where you'd come in, like, or like they're just in their diligence stream process? You'd be brought in to kind of analyze it's not quality of earnings, or is that it?
No, so I'd say
No.
it's typically pre-LOI. We're kind of helping them submit
Oh,
their
okay.
LOI bid.
Got it.
So on one side, if it's commercial due diligence, that's market due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
So everything from market sizing, customer supplier segmentation, really looking at the competitive landscape. How is this business different from their competitors? And then some value creation levers. What are some opportunities to grow this business post-investment on the commercial market side? And then on the operational side, that's kind of in line with the QOV being done. Then we'll kind of help them understand, specifically for a carve out is oftentimes when you're kind of leveraged for operational due diligence,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out, what is the run rate cost and one-time cost associated with standing up this business.
Yeah.
Frankly, oftentimes the seller will maybe understate EBITDA to make the business look a little more profitable. So our job is really to come in and look at, this is your carve out financials based upon our benchmarking and external analysis. This is what it's going to take to actually run this business, both from a headcount perspective as well as an operations perspective. And then kind of what is that going to cost overall to really kind of get them to a normalized
You're saying
EBITDA.
the seller will understate their EBITDA?
Excuse me, they'll overstate
it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I was
sorry.
like, okay.
Sorry, they will understate costs.
They'll understate costs, and then you go in and you're like, actually, you got to do this X, Y,
Yeah,
and Z.
you're actually going to need 2 FTEs. You're going to actually have to unload a new ERP, and that's going to cost you selection and consulting fees, and then integration fees.
Yeah, and so that you're often hired by a potential private equity sponsor to help them with that negotiation, sort of, right? In terms of
analysis and then potentially negotiations.
Yeah, although I got to say, with where the multiples are, they're probably looking at your advice and saying, sorry, but we had to bid, 25 times EBITDA anyways, or whatever. That's a little exaggeration, but 15 times to 20 times.
Yeah, what is the average multiple is like 13x last time I checked?
It's very high. Okay, so you're there for you're at Accenture, you're doing some interesting work, it sounds like, but it's again, the focus isn't necessarily on the private equity practice. You're thinking, I'd love to be somewhere where they're really focused and driven on that practice. So you end up kind of started looking. What else were you interviewing for, or how you just started the process when you talked to your former boss?
Yeah, so I interviewed at a few private equity firms on the operations side.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm sure you're aware, on the operations side, junior roles, they're really far and few between.
Vista, that was going to be my
Vista
question.
has a massive team. KKR Capstone has a massive team. But outside of those kind of 2 firms, there's not very many junior operator roles. So I was just reaching out, networking with as many people as I could, reaching out to headhunters, et cetera. So we're just kind of casting a wide net. So Accenture alum, just cold reaching out to people on LinkedIn,
mm-hmm.
Headhunters, et cetera. So really just kind of casting a wide net.
Were you always like one of these like serial networkers? Have you always been good at it, or do you feel like it took a while to get better at it? Like, were you to get those internships? Like, we didn't even go into this, but in undergrad, even, how did you land those?
So I think in undergrad, I didn't really understand the networking thing as much until my really best friend now introduced me to investment banking. my sophomore year.
Hmm.
And he was like, yeah, you just kind of reach out to people on LinkedIn, tell them you're interested in investment banking, give them some kind of bullets on your experience, and ask them to set up time to chat. And, it's super weird at first, but once you do it, you realize that everyone's doing it. So you need to do it.
Hmm.
And that people are just really willing to help and always happy to hop on the phone and chat with you.
Hmm.
So, once I kind of understood that it was acceptable and it was normal and, people are willing to help you,
Yeah.
I just kind of realized, why not? I'm the kind of person, if I to apply to a new job, I'm going to go find out who it's reporting to and then email that person directly and just kind of voice my experience and tell them I'm really excited about the role.
Yeah, it's great. I think there's a lot of a mental block for kids that are in college around the networking thing, thinking that why would they want to help me? And I can't offer them anything. And it's because the professionals actually feel good about helping. It's one of the bright spots of their day sometimes when they feel like they can see themselves in you.
Yeah.
So don't feel bad about reaching out. Sometimes it's a nice break for these professionals to chat with a kid for 10, 20 minutes. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just building upon that, don't get discouraged if someone is rude or doesn't respond. People just have bad days, people are busy, etc.
oh yeah, the response
Just
rate,
be respectful.
if you get a 5 to 10% response rate, you're doing it right.
Yeah.
On the cold emails. So, okay. So you had started interviewing a little bit at there's few and far between kind of roles. Were you working with recruiters? I mean, yeah, this operations type, like you said, junior roles are super rare. And then probably doesn't even exist for middle market funds primarily. So tell me a little bit of how you kind of went about it and how you even knew about this type of role.
Sorry, are we talking about now
We're talking about portfolio. Yeah.
Deloitte to my current role?
No, you had said initially that you were like interviewing for private equity operations. How did you even know to interview for that?
Yeah, so I'd say a few headhunters, a few cold reach outs were fruitful. It's kind of a mix of both those things.
Okay. And then so did you get an offer and not take it, or were you kind of final
I
rounds?
unfortunately did not get an offer. Spoke to a few firms, and
do they typically hire strategy consultants?
Yeah, I'd say most of their hires were either strategy consultants or oftentimes individuals who just had some really unique industry experience. Potentially worked with a vendor that then the PE firm decided that they really like to use, such as a vendor like digital marketing, for example, or sales transformation. So it's like kind of those are the two avenues that I mainly saw.
Very cool. Okay, so yeah, tell me how you ended up at Deloitte.
So. Yeah, absolutely. So interviewed with Deloitte. Kind of through that referral from a partner. Really enjoyed the practice. Really enjoyed the speaking with the partners at the firm, and just got really excited from speaking with the partners and learning that they're really trying to grow their private equity business. So knew it was something that I wanted to be a part of. So after 2 years, Accenture joined Deloitte and spent 2 years there, working on very similar work. So as part of what they call M&A strategy and due diligence, and in that role supported commercial due diligence, operational due diligence, growth strategy engagements, and then as well as did some M&A integration and divestiture work as well.
It's very cool. And so like you actually made a move as well from SF to New York, is that right?
So I was splitting time between SF and New York. Sponsors typically sit in New York, so which is
where are you from originally?
California.
California. Okay, so home is California. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you're there for a few years. Things are progressing. You're on interesting deals. Sounds like you guys had enough business, so you weren't on the beach too much.
Yeah.
You're like never.
Never.
You're working very hard. So tell me a little bit about the transition to an actual private equity or portfolio support type role.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the recruiters I've been working with in the kind of summer of 2020 had kind of reached out, mentioned he had a role at a lower middle market firm who's growing their portfolio support team. Currently, it was 2 vice presidents. They're looking to bring on an associate. So interviewed with the firm, and it was just a really good fit. Really connected well with the partners, connected well with my boss, the vice president, and just thought it'd be a really good role to really get to really drive some of the skills I had learned at Accenture, at Deloitte, into my current role.
So it's similar type of work. It's just now you're doing it for a portfolio, as a private equity fund rather than consulting firm as a client.
It's a little different in the sense of, we are three people across 35 portfolio companies. So oftentimes we're more project managing and helping drive the value versus actually doing the work, in the sense of, we'll hire a third party or consulting firm to do some of the work, whether it's an ERP cutover or a digital transformation related to branding, for example. We'll hire an external party, and then our role is really partnering with the management team, the deal team, and the third party to kind of make sure it's successful.
You give me an example of like, so you gave me a few there, but I think it's interesting to people to hear like a little bit of the day to day in terms of like, so a certain, like a branding, for example, project. So you're almost like a PM, you're managing a lot more
Correct.
rather than like, you're not necessarily in Excel doing all of the revenue builds, but like you're managing the consultants, you're reviewing work. Is that correct? Is that a way I could think of it?
Yeah, definitely. I think we're definitely doing a decent amount of Excel, internally, but, oftentimes engagements, we're definitely leveraging third parties to kind of use their intellectual horsepower and just their manpower to really drive value.
Is the fund ever bringing you on to look at new potential or new portfolio companies that they're looking at adding, or is it mostly all just, hey, you guys just focus purely on the portcos, help them?
So I'd say, it definitely differs fund to fund. In my fund, we're a little less focused on kind of pre-deal or kind of pre-investment work. But for example, we were looking at a business where my boss had previously been employed in a similar industry. So he was, jumping in and supporting sim review and helping them think through the diligence questionnaire, things like that. But just from a time value perspective, it's kind of the deal team is really focused on driving new deals, and we're just really focused on onboarding and value creation and kind of post investment.
So, I mean, it sounds like, for your role, the stuff you learned in consulting, it's translated really well over to what you're doing now. Besides the modeling, what are the other like key skills that people could kind of look to build to make themselves successful? Like, is it something where you just need the reps to like understand strategy better, or is there things they can study? Any suggestions?
Let's say PM, just project management is super important, being really organized, holding these third parties accountable. Where you can really drive value is just taking any weight off the deal team's hands. Things that they just don't have to get their feet in, and they can just kind of get the updates on. So it's really kind of project management, being organized. I'd say, I think what's underappreciated is just the level of finance knowledge. I don't, really model cash flows very often, but, understanding how cash flow works, understanding the impacts of CapEx, working capital, and things like that, I think are really important, just because the deal team, it's what they live in and breathe. And they sometimes forget that, other individuals in the organization aren't always, living and breathing that kind of stuff. So I think it's just really important, if possible, to kind of get some reps and understand that stuff at a more detailed level, so that when they ask you to jump in or, mention something looks off in CapEx, you kind of know what they're talking about. I think that's 2. I think 3, just any unique kind of functional expertise you can bring, whether it's sales transformation or, cost takeout or pricing strategy.
Can we talk a little bit of that? So what do you mean by sales transformation? Like, can you give me an example? Because I'm not a consultant, and a lot of my listeners probably aren't.
There's a number of sales transformation means so many different things.
Can you give me an example?
So for example, Salesforce effectiveness, what does that mean? How should you measure your Salesforce? For example, I was working with one of our portfolio companies the other day to help better track and manage their Salesforce. So we put around KPIs and metrics around, what does your sales funnel look like? So what are leads? What are kind of the next level in your sales funnel? What are, closed engagements? And then, from that perspective, so what are the different buckets within your sales funnel? Where are they today? How does that compare to last year? And then looking at it from also a sales individual perspective, looking at your entire sales force, looking at, what is their average revenue per a closed transaction, and really looking at, how does that compare to last year? How does that compare to year to date? And putting some analytics around the sales funnel to better be able to track and manage it, so that we can potentially, forecast revenue based upon the sales funnel going forward.
Very cool. And so you would be helping kind of manage the consultants that would help put in those analytics, or you would help actually build the analytics? And you would do you have enough skills to actually do that? And are they using something like a Salesforce CRM, or what typically, or it could be anything?
Yeah. So in this particular example, when we're just typically building analytics around measuring the Salesforce, that's something we'll kind of do internally. Our management team uses Salesforce. So then I'm kind of exporting their Salesforce data and putting it into Excel to be able just to kind of run some analytics.
Yep.
and then using those analytics in that dashboard to use during our monthly financial review calls to review the kind of key KPIs and metrics around the business.
And then so you'd be able to kind of monthly just pull down that Excel, place it into an input sheet, and then your Excel will spit out some sort of dashboard that'll give kind of updates.
Yeah, exactly. So every month our company sends us the kind of the raw data.
Yeah.
And then I've kind of built a dashboard. So I'll just
is that like Power BI, or is that what you're using, or what do you?
Let's say best in class. And that's what we want to eventually get to is Power BI.
Yeah.
Currently, we're just using Excel.
Okay. That's probably what I would do too, because I don't know how to use Power BI, even though we have a course. I should. We have a course on that. I should take it. Maybe build it for WSL. We need more analytics. We use Tableau a lot. So.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So okay. So you're doing all this stuff. Anything else like on the strategy side? I guess just reading and just understanding industries and how to look at industries and break them down.
Yeah. I mean, I think, doing maybe like 2 to 3 commercial due diligences just to understand how do you segment a market? How do you get to real, TAM, or what is a truly addressable market? How do you think, what are some things that a PE firm looks for? So for example, reoccurring revenue versus non-reoccurring revenue. What is the SKU split? Things like that to understand gross margin.
Very cool. So yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing your story. Is there anything else you'd want to share before we call? Any final words of wisdom for the listeners in terms of how to follow in your footsteps? Because I think there's a lot of people looking to get to the investing role, but not as many people even know about portfolio support. And I think it can be a great option for management consultants specifically who actually enjoy the work, but they're looking to get a little closer to the investment side.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think this role is growing more and more. More and more funds are growing value creation roles, and oftentimes they have operating partners or the director, SVP level, and they're slowly building their teams out down. Let's say a few things. One, I think just reaching out to as many people as possible, just networking. These roles are kind of more few and far between. So by having connections with individuals, you're kind of top of mind to them if a role were to come up. I think that's one. I think two, just getting a broad set of experience. Even if the role isn't supporting a private equity firm, we do own companies. We don't own private equity firms. So just getting any kind of strategic experience that you can get on any number of engagements, even IT integration or IT cutovers. We're constantly thinking about companies have an ERP, or we've bought 4 companies and 4 different ERPs. We're going to need to integrate one of them. So I think, just finding ways like that to really differentiate your skill set is just super important.
And ERP is just like enterprise software type thing. What does it stand for? ERP?
Enterprise resource planning, just enterprise software. But
enterprise software,
yeah. At the highest level, you have 4 companies using different softwares.
Yeah.
You're going to need to onboard them to one software.
Yeah. Oh, what a nightmare. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh man. So great. Well, I appreciate all that. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, and best of luck to you and in all the in your future path. Sounds like you're in the right direction.
Perfect. Thanks, Patrick.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, Patrick at wallstreetoasis.com. Until next time.